Sweet. Uh, really quickly, thank you all so much for welcoming me here to talk about the Julia language. I have to state my bias that um, the Julia language is what I think. It's definitely my favorite tech thing. I'm also the community manager for the Julia language, so I have that conflict. But even if they fired me tomorrow, it would still be my favorite tech thing. So thanks again for having me here, and I'm super excited to talk about Julia. So the basic idea, why does somebody need another programming language? It's a great question to ask. Sort of the reality of the last sort of 25 years is you have all these programming languages which are super accessible to developers like Python or R or something like MATLAB. And those are sort of designed with some of the idea, the reason Python, in my opinion, is so popular is because it's so expressive and it's easy to use and you can sort of do lots of cool things in a short amount of time. But in a production environment, when you actually want to take whatever you built in Python or R or MATLAB and then take it to production, a lot of the times you would have to, sort of rewrite the application in C++, C#, Java, something that's considered like a production level programming language. And that sort of leads to this inefficiency in the process. You sort of have the people, you have two separate sets of people. You have like people who are doing research and cool things, prototyping ideas, and then you have people who are actually building these production systems. So Julia was sort of built with the quote unquote two language problem in mind, where we could actually hopefully solve it in a way that Julia is super expressive and has syntax that are very similar to Python, but it's also just as fast as C at runtime. So you sort of have the best of both worlds in that way, which is super fun. And I'll show you some slides later on, but I think the coolest part for me is you now have the ability to sort of solve all these problems that previously it just wasn't possible to solve them. So the Julia community and the package ecosystem is probably one of the most fun things to talk about. I'm fortunate enough to be the Julia language community manager. And the Julia community is sort of what keeps me doing everything that I do, because it's such a unique community. I think I programmed in Python before I learned Julia and a bunch of other languages. And you would go and ask a question on Stack Overflow, and everyone would say a bunch of mean things to you if you didn't do it exactly the way that they wanted you to format your question or whatever. And I sort of think the Julia community has been super open and accepting and kind to me, and it's really wanted me to make that the experience for other people. So I'm glad that I get to do what I get to do. And here's all the other fun facts, lots of downloads, lots of great packages. It's all open source. Tons of companies use Julia. I started using Julia when I was actually interning at NASA, doing some computational stuff at the NASA Ames Research Center, which was a ton of fun. So I'm grateful for them for introducing me to Julia. Lots of schools teach Julia. Perhaps you've seen it, maybe you haven't. There was actually a course at MIT, which this past semester, which is sort of the first time I've ever seen this, but the professors who were teaching the Julia class actually collaborated with a bunch of YouTubers. So if anyone knows 3 Blue 1 Brown, he makes all these really awesome, like super expressive videos about programming and math and stuff like that. He's really great. In my opinion, he actually was one of the professors for the course, even though he's not a actual MIT professor. He helped teach the course, and it was free and open, and sort of like the way that school should be. So that was really cool to see. Lots of press stuff talking about Julia. I think the biggest piece very recently that has come up that's been very interesting to see for me is the annual Stack Overflow developer survey. And that sort of revealed to us that The Julia language is one of the fastest growing languages, and it's also one of the most loved, which is awesome to see. I think there's a lot of people who program in languages and they don't enjoy the experience. So to see that people actually enjoy using Julia is always awesome to see. Some of the more interesting things, and this is definitely not something that perhaps this is of interest to you all, but I'm not a machine learning or data science expert, but it's definitely something that people who are in the Julia community are using it for. It has, you have native GPU support, all this scalable, fast stuff so that you can do all your computationally intensive calculations and stuff like that. So this is sort of the fun things to look at. So the Celeste project, essentially they were trying to build an atlas of the sky, and you can see the numbers of how much computational speed and stuff that they were using. But this was a couple of years ago, and this was one of the original projects that actually got Julia on the map as far as an actual viable programming language to use in a production setting. So it joined. Julia is one of 3 programming languages in the Petaflop Club, which is programming languages that can compute up to a petaflop of data. There's some criteria for the specific challenge, but Julia is one of those languages, which is super exciting. The Kalima project is something that I think is super fascinating. I wish that I was smart enough to understand all the stuff, but it's a project out of Caltech and a bunch of other places. And they're building like a full-on model of the entire climate. And this is sort of one of the key steps to solving climate change, is actually being able to understand what's happening in the world. And the Kalima project is hoping to do that. And they're fully programming it in Julia, which was super, super cool to see. But yeah, it's another one of the super adventurous projects that's using Julia. And the last one that I'll share with you, I had a chance to be a part of this Pumas project, which essentially what they're trying to allow you to do is in real time do simulations and create a personalized drug dose for each patient. So you can actually go to your doctor's office and, right now I walk in and the next person walks in, and if we both have similar symptoms and they determine it's the same disease, we're both going to end up getting the same prescription. Go take 2 of whatever this drug is and you're going to get better. And the reality is, like, my body internally is completely different than the next person, and how much of the drug I really need and what the specific drugs are, it's all different. So the Pumas project is actually trying to do this, and they've got a ton of awesome people on this team. And I was, again, super fortunate to be a part of it. And I can't say enough cool things about it, just because it's such an interesting, it feels like what the future is going to look like in a few years. There's definitely other really cool things. The system that the FAA uses to make sure that airplanes don't crash into each other uses Julia. It's called CASX. And there's a team at Stanford that does a bunch of cool Julia stuff, and they developed it. So you can check out the link at the Julia Computing website and some more interesting case studies. One of the big challenges for the Julia community is, with Python and with R and with all these other languages, there's so many great packages to do machine learning, image recognition, all of this stuff. So that's sort of been, from a core language standpoint, if you compare Julia versus Python, in my opinion, I think that Julia as a language, because of the way that it was written, is better for a developer potentially. The real challenge is all of those libraries. And I think Python's got a ton of world-class libraries. So, the Julia community and the people using Julia have to sort of play catch up. I think the ones that are worth pointing out are JUMP for operations research, the differential equations package. Those two are sort of the world-class packages in the Julia community. And those are both the differential equations package is what's powering all of the cool stuff that's happening with Pumas. And my final plug to get people involved. So if you know anyone who, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with Google Summer of Code, but we're part of Google Summer of Code every summer. We're always looking for, at least for the specific criteria for Google Summer of Code, you have to be a college student, but we're also part of Google Seasons of Docs if you're interested in technical writing. And we have, I think, like 7 or 8 people right now who are technical writers, and they're just wrapping up Google Season of Docs. So we're always looking for new people to be a part of these programs. And they're a ton of fun, and it's a great way to get involved in the Julia community, learn cool stuff, be at the cutting edge, differentiate yourselves in the workforce, all those cool things. So feel free to shoot me an email if you have questions. Thank you all. It was great to present and share. Hopefully that was within 5 minutes. I'm guessing not.
That was awesome. I had not heard of Julia before, so I love being able to hear about new languages, especially new up and coming languages. So that was really cool. I want to open the floor up for any questions, but before, I feel like there's like a lot of technical questions that we can ask after that talk. I had maybe the most technical of all. Why did you choose the name Julia?
That is a great question. I think there's a bunch of urban legends about why the name Julia was chosen. And I forget what what the answer boils down to. I forgot what the exact answer is, but it was arbitrary. There's some myths about what it was, but it is arbitrary. There's unfortunately no cool meaning. But the logo does look cool. I like the dots.
It does look cool. Adam is asking, why does Julia have the end keyword?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think Adam, my understanding is that when Julia was written, they were trying to bridge the gap between some of these other languages. And I think in a lot of the languages that I mentioned that people use to actually deploy their code, C, C++, Java, you have curly braces for the most part. And then you sort of get to these other languages like Python. And one of the really frustrating parts, at least for me when I program in Python, is, there's no curly braces. I always have to make sure my indentation is perfect. So Julia sort of bridges the gap in a less curly braces way. I think that's my best answer.
Makes sense.
How would you recommend getting started in Julia or like learning Julia? Are there tutorials on the website?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. The learning section of the website links to a bunch of different stuff. So one of the very cool parts is there's a super active community on this website called exorcism.io, and it's essentially just a bunch of computer science problems, and there's like one-on-one mentoring for free built into this platform. So it's a great way to learn and have somebody help you if you have questions and all that good stuff. But then there's also tons of tutorials from all the awesome people in the community.
Awesome. I hadn't heard of exorcism.io either. So learning so many new things today.
It's super cool. And you can sign up to mentor on there. And there's all these tons of opportunities to get involved and also to learn new languages and stuff.
Very cool. And thank you, Martha, for dropping the link to Exorcism in the chat so we can all look at it. That was great. Any other, also, it looked like Adam, for the record, is team indentation, not team bracket. But any other questions for Logan or any of our other speakers that we had so far? As I wait for questions, heads up, we are about to open the floor up for anyone that might have a talk or just a couple things that they want to talk about. So if that's you, let us know, start getting ready, but I will pause again just in case anyone has any more questions for Logan.
I have a question. Julia, as you said, can be used for like writing various applications, right? So if I want to write the backend for a web application, because I read that Julia has some XML HTTP packages and things like that, um, or I'm pretty sure it also has something with which it can connect to a database and things like that. So where would we host Julia? For instance, we have PHP, we have Jamstack and things like that. How do you do that with Julia?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And this might be a partial answer. If you're familiar with the Django web development framework for Python, there's sort of a parallel to that in Julia, and it's called Genie, Genie. And they also have a very neat logo. But that's sort of the Django equivalent. There is database connection. There's a organization on GitHub called JuliaDB, and they sort of build all the database integrations in Julia. So maybe that answers your question. There's also people at MIT working on a, I don't think I have a good understanding of exactly what they're doing, but a way of running Julia in its pure form on the web instead of like being wrapped through some other interface. It's called like WASM or something like that. And they're doing lots of cool stuff there.
Okay, that's great. I mean, it's somewhere, we can start and start looking things by ourselves. But that's a lot of good information. Thank you so much. And lastly, I had one question. So I'm pretty sure it does have. So it does have its own compiler, right? Like, what do you do if you want to get started? Do you have to download like a separate compiler for Julia?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the compiler is part of it. Adam is saying some very kind things in the chat about Julia. But if you go to the Julia language website, just julialang.org, there's a download section. Download it, it'll come with an executable, and then you can invoke it just like you would Python through the terminal, or it comes with a little desktop icon that you can click on and open up. But yeah, it does have a compiler. And it is built in.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, those are great questions. Thank you for asking them.